Let's start with something you've probably heard maybe 100 times, and that is that dating is a marketplace. And on the surface, it sounds logical, right? People have preferences, there's supply and demand, attraction, compatibility, competition. It's all just economics, right? But you've been on, I'm not sure, have you ever been on the receiving end of that mindset? Like if you felt like your worth depended on your appearance or on your outcome or your income, your confidence, your performance. I mean, you already know something about that metaphor. It kind of feels wrong, right? Because it just doesn't describe dating. It actually shapes it, I'd say. It tells us that love is a transaction and that people are products and that you're either valuable or you're losing. That's what this episode is about. Not just the problems with modern dating per se, but also the deeper myths that we've swallowed. That love works like a marketplace and that the key to connection is improving your offer, right? That rejection means that you didn't meet those requirements, and that if you're single, it must be because your profile didn't perform well enough. And here's the cost of that mindset, I would say. It basically turns people into brands. It turns vulnerability into risk management, and it turns dating into this cycle of chasing external upgrades instead of building internal wholeness. So let's just pause there a moment and name something clearly here. This isn't about pretending that attraction does not matter. This is not about demonizing the standards or preferences that people have. This is not about saying that everyone deserves everyone. I think it's about this though. What happens when the entire foundation of how we pursue love is built on performance? I mean, what happens when we start seeing each other and ourselves through this lens of leverage? Because when that happens, something sacred starts to break, I believe. And so we stop asking, can I be known here? And we start asking, do I measure up? I mean, let's maybe just take a step back a moment, shall we? The dating marketplace metaphor, it didn't come from nowhere, I think. I think it was born from decades of disconnection, and frustration, and loneliness, especially among men. Men who were told that they had to earn their love by leveling up. Men who were shown that status and looks were the only way to matter. Men who tried being kind and honest and open and were ignored. And so the marketplace model gave language to this plan. It gave it a framework, and it made rejection feel less personal and a bit more structural. She didn't choose me because I wasn't high value enough, or I need to improve my SMV, right? It's just hypergamy, right? It's not about me. In one sense, that framework, it gives relief, but it also gave that order from chaos. But it took something as well. It stripped away the humanity of that process. It turned softness into a liability, and it made connection feel more like a conquest. And here's the tragic twist, I think. The more that we believe dating is a marketplace, the more that we act like products instead of people. We optimize, we perform, we brand ourselves, we post only our best angles, right? And we say what we think that others want to hear. And in all that performing, we lose intimacy. Because intimacy is not about impressing someone. Intimacy is about being known even in your messiness. So let's talk about the effects of this mindset and how people date. You see, if dating is a marketplace, then every interaction becomes this negotiation, right? Every rejection becomes a devaluation, and every relationship becomes a deal that has to be optimized. And I think that's where so much of the disillusionment comes from. Because people aren't designed to be compared like cars, are they? I mean, you're not just a bundle of features that's competing for attention. You're not a pitch deck. You're not a specific price point. You're a human being with longing and complexity and a need for connection that can't be satisfied through strategy alone. So let's name something else here. The dating marketplace. This myth hits men and women differently, I think. But ultimately it hurts everyone. And for men, it often leads to this spiral of self-critique and frustration. They say, why am I not enough? Never enough. Why do I have to fix this? Why do women always choose the same kind of guy? And for women, it creates this pressure to maintain desirability, to navigate attention as a currency, and to constantly feel like they're being evaluated for their value and not for their heart. So no one wins when people are treated like products, right? This is where I think we begin to reclaim something a bit deeper. Because even though the dating world might feel like a market, you don't have to act like a brand. You don't have to reduce your wholeness to stats. And you don't have to hide your softness behind performance. Further, you don't have to sell a version of yourself just so that you can feel seen. Because connection, like the real grounded healing kind of connection, that was never meant to be transactional. It was meant instead to be relational, emotional, mutual, tender, and true. So let's talk about what happens when you internalize the marketplace mindset. It's here that you start believing that your worth is conditional on your success, conditional on your level of confidence, conditional on how your looks are, your body fat, your income, and the lifestyle that you live. And this isn't just about what others are expecting from you, it's about what you also start expecting from yourself. So you look in the mirror, and instead of asking, how am I feeling? Instead you're asking, how would I be ranked? And slowly you stop relating to yourself as a person, and you start seeing yourself instead as a product, as something that needs to be refined, polished, marketed. Whereas deep down, you can feel that killing your spirit. Because there's nothing more dehumanizing than thinking, if I want love, I have to be better than I am right now. This is especially devastating for men who have struggled with rejection. When every failed interaction gets interpreted as proof that you're low value, then you begin to resent the entire process. And you start assuming that people only care about superficial things. And so you start doubting that your inner world matters. And so you stop leading with who you truly are and start leading with what you think others want from you. And then, if someone does choose you, it doesn't really feel good because in the deepest parts, you know that they didn't choose you. They chose the version of you that you were performing and presenting and thinking that would align with their wants. And so the insecurity never actually gets diminished because even in your success, you're still unknown. But let's be honest, right? This affects the mindset in the area of intimacy. When people act like products, connection now becomes a negotiation. And so you hear phrases like, she brings this to the table and I bring that to the table. Or I deserve someone that's based on my level. Or it's only fair that I get someone as hot or as successful or as fit as I am. Or I'm not wasting my time on something that doesn't have a good return. This isn't partnership. It's commerce. And the moment things stop feeling profitable, people walk. That's why so many people feel disposable in dating today, because in this marketplace mindset, If you stop providing value, you're out. But connection is supposed to, it's not supposed to work like that. You see, true intimacy says something like, I want to know you, not just what you're offering me. Or I want to stay curious even when you're not optimized. Or I don't want to leave the moment that you disappoint me. That is love, not leverage. Let's name another cost of dating in this marketplace model. See, it destroys trust. Because if everyone is trying to get the best deal, you stop believing anyone is acting from a genuine place. You assume that compliments are manipulative. You assume that their interest is just temporary. You assume that warmth is a tactic that they're utilizing. And over time, that suspicion, it becomes permanent. So even when someone good comes along, someone kind and available and emotionally honest, you're likely to push them away because you don't trust the game anymore. And more than that, you don't trust yourself not to lose again. And that's why the marketplace mindset, it just breeds fear instead of openness. It breeds control instead of surrender, and suspicion instead of trust. So what's the alternative? If we reject the dating marketplace myth, how do we approach relationships without collapsing into chaos? Well, we start with integrity. That means you're letting your inner values guide your external actions. It means you're showing up as the version of yourself that you would want to live with, even when it's going to cost you in the short-term validation department. It means saying things like, I'd rather be truly known and rejected than to be chosen for something that I'm pretending to be. That's the foundation of what emotional wholeness looks like. Not just being picked, but being picked as you are truly. And then we also lean into intimacy, right? Not just physical closeness here, but the kind of emotional presence that says, intimacy, intimacy, intimacy. You stop performing and you start revealing. You stop selling and you start sharing. You stop comparing and instead you start connecting. That kind of intimacy is scary because it's real. But it's also what we're all starving for, because deep down, no one wants to win a partner instead of building something with them. One who can see us and hear us and stay. So let me say this clearly. You are not a product. You're not a project. You're not a number in someone's algorithm. What you are is you're a human being that is worthy of love, not because of your ranking and not because of your valuation, but because of your existence. And anyone who needs you to perform in order to stay is not offering you love. They're offering you a role. And you weren't made to play someone else's idea of what enough looks like. Instead, you were made to be known. So let's talk a little bit about the toll of this mindset on the emotional world that you're experiencing. Because it's not just that the dating marketplace is flawed, it's that it slowly starts to rob you of your ability to feel like you're whole. And when you spend years seeing through your value through someone else's desire, though the ones who swipe and text back or choose you, you start outsourcing your self-worth to strangers. And every reaction cuts deeper than it should because it doesn't feel like that didn't work out. It feels more like I wasn't enough. And every silence feels like confirmation. See, you're forgettable, you'll say to yourself. And that's what performance-based connection does. It keeps you in this loop of constant proving, right? Never arriving, never resting, never trusting. And that loop is exhausting. It doesn't just affect your dating life, it bleeds into your friendships, it bleeds and affects your confidence and your creativity, your ability to sit with yourself in stillness without questioning your worth. Let's maybe talk a little bit about the loneliness experience. There's a kind of loneliness that's worse than being alone, I think. It's being with someone while you're still feeling unseen. And in the dating marketplace, that's actually quite common. Because when people choose each other based on performance, they often stay based on fear. Fear of losing the status, fear of being alone again, fear of their partner finding someone better. So they settle for something that's transactional, whereas a relationship is supposed to be built on roles and not on reality. And deep down, like both people know, we're not fully here. We're just holding space and holding on. And that's not intimacy. That, I would say, is negotiation. And it creates a silent kind of a grief that's hard to name, because everything looks fine on the outside. Whereas inside, you're starving for someone to see the parts of you that others don't see well and don't sell well. And so the real connection, what does it look like on the outside of this marketplace? It means being chosen without being chased. It looks like being received without being edited. And it looks like being loved in your rawness and not just your polished state. And that kind of connection isn't loud. It doesn't get as many likes. It doesn't come with fireworks, but it's real and it stays. So let's talk about what healing could look like. If you spent years seeing yourself through this lens of performance, here's what healing may look like. Well, you stop marketing yourself, for starters. You stop leading with your resume. You stop leading with your attributes, and you let people meet your reality instead of your highlight reel. And you notice when you're chasing approval, when you change your tone and your style and your opinions, just so you can stay desirable. But ask in that moment, what am I afraid would happen if I were to remain honest? You practice presence over positioning further. So instead of trying to impress others, you listen. Instead of trying to win, you stay grounded. And you build connection slowly, not to try and close a deal, but to experience something real and alive. Moreover, you grieve the times when you were passed over for wrong reasons, because that pain is still real. You were ready and you were honest, you were probably kind, and they still didn't choose you. So let yourself feel that. It's not a weakness, that's a necessary mourning. Then remember, your worth isn't earned, it's carried. You don't have to convince someone to love you. You only have to let yourself be seen fully, even in your fear, especially in your fear. See, the dating marketplace says, become what they want. Whereas wholeness says, become who you are and let the right ones find you there. Because not everyone deserves your depths. Not everyone is ready for your honesty, and not everyone can hold the weight of your presence. But that doesn't make you any less. That makes you true. And being true in a world of performance is like an act of rebellion. It's like a revolution. So here's something else I want you to think about. If you're tired of being treated like a product, you have to stop treating others in a similar way as well. See, this mindset, it doesn't just hurt those who are rejected, it also dehumanizes those who are desired. People with privilege and beauty and charisma or power often find themselves equally unseen or valued for not their identity but their image. And when you reduce someone to what they're offering, you're robbing that person of who you and they could be if you experienced each other in reality. So yes, have standards and be clear about what you want, yes. But let those standards come from a place of wholeness and not from fear. Let your Let your boundaries be rooted in love and not control. Let your choice reflect your soul and not scarcity. That's how we can build something better. But let's take a moment and imagine something that could be different. What would it look like if we could relate to ourselves and to others as whole people, not just as those who are performing in a game? Well, what would shift if we entered into connection with a curiosity instead of comparison? What if love was no longer something that you win, but it's something instead that you build? But let's get practical, shall we? Here's a few truths to consider carrying with you. Number one, your worth is not a ranking. You're not falling behind. You're not some invisible scoreboard of desirability. Your experiences, your wounds, your growth, they are not liabilities. They are your life. And they're allowed to be seen, not just in the polished zone. So stop measuring yourself against what they want and start asking, what do I actually want to offer? Secondly, desire is not the same as love. Just because someone wants you, it doesn't mean that they're going to care for you. And just because someone doesn't desire you, it doesn't mean that you're unworthy of care. So when you treat attraction like a currency, you're going to end up bankrupting your own emotional world. So let desire exist, yes, but let discernment lead. Because love that's built on lust alone rarely lasts, but the love that's built on seeing and being seen, that changes lives. Thirdly, you're allowed to slow down. You don't have to perform at every interaction. You don't have to sell your soul just to be liked. You can take your time and you can say, I'm not sure yet, right? You can build connection through shared presence and not strategic posturing or positioning. Slow is safe and wise, and it's how trust grows. Fourthly, you don't owe anyone except yourself. This isn't about giving up. This is about coming home to the version of you that doesn't need to constantly be proved to be lovable. So yes, grow, heal, build your life in a way that makes you proud, but not because you're chasing the approval of a marketplace. Do it because you finally believe that you're worth coming home to. Now, let me speak to those of you who have felt invisible in dating. If you've spent years watching others get picked while you're left wondering what's wrong with you, please hear me on this one. Your story is not less valid because it's been quiet. Your heart is not less valuable because it's been overlooked by others. And your love is not less powerful because it hasn't been returned yet. And you aren't late. You aren't broken. And you aren't unlovable. You are human. And connection will always be your birthright, even if it hasn't found you yet. So don't shrink into a version of yourself that's easier to market. Let the real you have space to breathe. Because the real you is what someone is praying for, that they'll one day be safe enough to find. So to those who've been chosen only because of their surface offerings, if people have only wanted your body or your charm or your image, and if you felt loved only in the parts that made others look good, I want you to know that that's not love. That's protection. And you deserve more than to be someone's status symbol. You deserve to be known in your depths, especially in the places that you hide. And yes, that might mean that some people will leave you when they finally meet the real version of you. But let them, because the ones who stay, they're not buying a product. They're choosing a person. And they're choosing you for the real reasons that ought to be chosen. So what do you do with this dating world that still feels so transactional? Well, we build something better in the middle of it, right? We practice love with integrity. It's where our actions reflect our values, and we pursue intimacy, not through trying to be perfect, but by being present. We lead with curiosity, and we reject comparison. We stop trying to be high value and instead practice our humanity, because that's where the revolution is that can't be algorithmically optimized. And when you show up in the real, messy, grounded kind of unfinished work, you begin to break the cycle. You interrupt the marketplace and you create a new story. And that story, it might not always get you picked first, but it will get you known, and that's what lasts. To anyone listening who's tired of feeling like you're not enough in this system, you were never meant to be sold. You were instead meant to be seen. And seen as you are, like in your present form. Seen in the voice that you have, in this space that you're taking up, seen by those who are quietly nodding and saying, yeah, I felt the same thing too. You are not a product. You're not a brand. You're not a profile. You're a person. You're a soul a heart that has a heart that beats and longs and hopes and fears. And it takes courage to keep showing up this way. And you're allowed to show up without performing. You're allowed to be loved without having to market yourself. You're allowed to take off the costume and to say, this is me, and I am still worthy, because you are worthy.